Bad practices are prevalent since God knows how long ago. It happened in all fields: government, politics, economy, religion, medical, you name it. But what about science? Isn't science all about the truth? Well, unfortunately, scientists are still human. So, of course, bad practices also happen in this field. That includes the field of taxonomy, which is my field. Well, part of my field at least. Today I would like to talk about it because more and more people are interested in taxonomy. So I would like to introduce the bad practices to the general public so more people could identify which one you should be skeptical of. Actually, you should always maintain a healthy level of skepticism when looking at science. But anyway, let's jump into the topic. First of all, why would a scientist even do that? Well, the answer is, most of the time, fame. In taxonomy, there is a term called Mihi Itch or Mihi Itch. Mihi means ego in Latin. It's basically the itch to satisfy own ego. In this case, Mihi Itch is used to talk about the ambition to describe a new taxon as a mean to seek fame. Most of the time, it's people seeking to discover quote-unquote new species. Okay, but what's the deal with new species? What's so special about it? Well, actually, that question is better suited for the general public. Taxonomy is not all about discovering new taxon. There are various taxonomic works, for example, characterization. Characterization is also a cool thing for me because taxonomy is my field and I understand how difficult it could be. In some cases, it's even a bigger achievement than discovering a new species. However, let's be real. If you have a friend that basically knows nothing about taxonomic work and you tell them you discover a certain characteristic that can differentiate between two similar species, your friend would probably be like, "Oh, nice, cool story, bro." However, if you tell them you discover a new species, now that's a whole nother level. Most people think it's a big achievement. Well, it is an achievement for sure, but I'm not exactly sure why new species is perceived as something grand by the general public. Actually, if you are not a biologist and you think discovering a new species is cool, you should tell me why. I want to know your perspective. Anyway, the problem with this behavior is it creates a condition called taxonomic inflation. Taxonomic inflation is the rapid increase of taxon name not because of a new discovery, but because of a change in concept. In practice, it usually happens when a lot of subspecies are raised into a distinct species. The thing is, raising a subspecies into a species is inherently not a bad thing by itself. The bad practices happen when people are doing that just for the sake of inscribing their name to a species authorship. Basically, they want their name to be put alongside a new species. You know, for, well, fame, I guess. In many cases, it looks arbitrary. Well, if you understood taxonomy at least. General public won't notice that most of the time. People just see a new species discovery headlines and be excited, which, to be fair, is also not a bad thing. Being excited is fine, you know? It's just, as someone in the field, it feels like I'm looking at people being scammed, which is not a good feeling for me personally. Still, taxonomic inflation is not even the worst case. There is a worse state, which is called taxonomic vandalism. To put it simply, taxonomic vandalism is an act to describe numerous taxonomic names without adequate research. This is, in most cases, not peer-reviewed. The differences between these supposed new species are minuscule, sometimes even unclear, and definitely questionable. If you are into herpetology, there is an infamous person that are always brought up when people are talking about taxonomic vandalism. This person named an outrageous number of quote-unquote new taxa, especially between 2012 and 2020. I mean, just look at this number. I'm sure even the general public will realize how outrageous that is. In fact, some herpetologists hate that specific person. By hate, I mean calling names in Twitter. Both ways, by the way. Like retweeting each other. You could check it out yourself if you really want to. It's on Twitter after all. Anyway, If you are the type of person who are curious of these type of things, but you want a more civilized opinion, I would suggest reading this article right here. Or, alternatively, if you want to read a more scientific one, you could read this one instead. Or, if you are starving for crumbs, you could just check out all these articles if you want to know the full context. But anyway, this case is not limited to herpetology, of course. Another infamous case happened in malacology, specifically this case. There might be another example that I'm not familiar with, but these two are enough example, I suppose. Now, a publication in 2023 pointed out another version of vandalism, which is nomenclatural harvesting. In this case, people look at phylogenetic trees published in another publication, check if there are unnamed operational taxonomic unit, and then name those as new species in their own publication. The problem is, of course, they don't do the research themselves. Most of the time, when zoologists that published a taxonomy publication did not assign a specific name to an operational taxonomic unit on their phylogenetic tree, that's because they themselves are uncertain. Further researches are needed. Imagine if you plant a fruit tree, then you want to wait it out until the fruits are ripe, but suddenly, out of nowhere, someone plucked those fruits, which are not even ripe yet. That's the gist of it. However, those are just one side of this topic. There is another, which I'll also talk about in this video, of course. But before that, let's take a few seconds break so you can rest your eyes and perhaps drink some water while you're at it. Alright, so the other side is straight up fraud, taxonomic fraud, sometimes also called taxonomic forgeries. Sometimes, the specimen itself is fake. Those who are into paleontology should especially be aware of these occurrences. In this case, they modify the specimen. Sometimes a fossil is modified so it resembles another thing, like this case for example, where a fossil crayfish is modified in such way so it resembles a spider. Sometimes a bone from extant animals is published as fossil. Some of you might be familiar with the Piltdown Man, which was advertised as the missing link between early apes and man. In reality, it's just an altered orangutan's mandible and teeth combined with the cranium of a human. In fact, I myself had stumbled upon a fraud fossil before. Sometimes, these are made by people who want to sell fossils. Other times, it's modified by researchers to, make an exceptional publication, I guess. And this is, of course, not limited to fossils. There was a somewhat famous case involving Linnaeus, which was the papilio-eclipses. So, there was a guy called James Pettifer who had a lot of insects collection. He received a unique specimen from his friend, William Charlton. Actually, why am I telling you the whole story? Long story short, this specimen was named Papilio-eclipses by Linnaeus in 1763. However, the reality is, this specimen was just a modified common brimstone. To be precise, it's just a painted common brimstone. It's not even an intricate modification, and perhaps just an artistic act, not even intended to make it look like an unknown species. Well, who knows what were actually happening though. Those people are no longer here, so we couldn't ask them. Anyway, not only are people forging the specimens, some might also falsify the information surrounding the specimen. For example, people falsifying the origin of the specimens. That might sound unimpactful, but it actually matters a lot. For example, what if I told you I found a polar bear inside a volcano? That's outrageous, right? I mean, of course I'm taking it to the extreme, but I'm just trying to make it easy to understand. Specimen origin is important to identify the animal, analyze evolutionary relationship, dispersal, etc. So yeah, it really does matter. And then, what's even worse in my opinion is people that simply lie in the publication. They falsify the data, they falsify the result of the analysis that are written in the publication. In these cases, when others ask to see their specimens, they'll usually make excuses. This, of course, will raise suspicion in the scientific community. Still, the general public don't know about this most of the time, so yeah. Actually, there's another topic that is related to this one, but not exactly a bad practice in taxonomy per se. For that, let me talk about the Acambaro figures for a bit. I actually planned to make a video of Acambaro figures for April Fool, but I missed the timing, so I'll just do it in this video. Basically, Acambaro figures are ceramic figurines that depicts dinosaur coexisting with humans. It was claimed to date back to 2500 BC, and these figures was often used to support the creationist narrative. You know, how dinosaurs and humans once coexist at the same period of time. However, further examination revealed the fact that these were most likely created in the 20th century. So yeah, it's definitely not from an ancient civilization that coexists with dinosaurs. Actually, the case where specimens are forced to support the narrative that humans coexist with dinosaurs at some points are, funnily enough, quite prevalent. The most famous one is probably the Paluxy track, where this track right here exists among the dinosaur tracks. This one is most likely just a usual metatarsal track, but modified because of a mud collapse sometimes during the fossilization. Of course, there are other examples of the case of quote-unquote human tracks among dinosaur tracks. Some might even be forgery, just for the sake of proving human coexist with dinosaur in the past. I personally find it distasteful, but well, people are just doing human things, I guess. It's whatever if it is harmless, but unfortunately, acts like these could cause confusion, especially for the general public. And yeah, those are the bad practices in taxonomy that I could think of right now that are still prevalent even to this day. I hope scientists would just stick to the truth, just like how science should be. At least, if you want to have some copium, keep it to yourself or just spread it within your community. Actually, that could create a cult, so never mind. Just orient towards the truth as always. And that's all from me. Let us know in the comment if you have encountered other examples so more people will be aware. Hope you enjoy whatever you are doing, and as always, enjoy your day.